Welcome to Washington. I'm Shannon Bream in for Brett Baer. Donald Trump announced his communications team hours after he made headlines again via Twitter. One of Hillary Clinton's major lines of attack against Donald Trump during the campaign was that he lacked the temperament to have his finger on the nuclear button. Well, today, the president-elect tweeted that it's time for a major nuclear upgrade. Correspondent Peter Ducey has the latest tonight from West Palm Beach. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Shannon. The next White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, is a longtime ally of the next White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus, and he will be responsible for communicating with the public on behalf of a president who we saw again today doesn't always like it when people speak on his behalf.
It is time to drain the damn swamp.
The next president says one of his classic campaign lines isn't going anywhere, tweeting, quote, "Someone incorrectly stated that the phrase drain the swamp was no longer being used by me. Actually, we will always be trying to DTS." Turns out that someone was one of Mr. Trump's top surrogates. Just yesterday, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said this of the famous line about cleaning up D.C.
I'm told he now disclaims that.
Today, Gingrich recanted, tweeting, quote, "I goofed. Draining the swamp is in. At Real Donald Trump is going to do it, and the alligators should be worried. Hashtag DTS. And on the day Mr. Trump received his second consecutive presidential daily briefing, he also tweeted this, quote, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." Mr. Trump was tweeting from Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and his daughter Ivanka headed that way from New York. She and her family were harassed by a passenger who disagrees with her father's politics. The passenger reportedly tweeted his intention to confront Ms. Trump and was so...
Scientists warned that the volcano that caused the largest eruption in European history might be getting ready to blow again. The volcano is called Campi Flegrei, and it's located under the Italian city of Naples. Campi Flegrei is what's known as a supervolcano. It's so large that at one point it ejected more than 240 cubic miles of ash, pumice, and lava. Volcanic eruptions are notoriously hard to predict, but scientists writing in the journal Nature say that the volcano is nearing a critical point, identified in other volcanoes when rising magma can cause an eruption. The last time Campi Flegrei erupted, Italy ended up with a new mountain. That was all the way back in 1538, and it was a relatively small eruption, and an even earlier eruption was so large it might have killed off the Neanderthals. Despite warnings that the volcano could be about to erupt, scientists also made it clear that they couldn't say when or even if it would actually go off.
Today, after a volcano erupted in the Aleutian Islands that reportedly sent ash thousands of feet into the air, the Alaska Volcano Observatory issued its highest alert level for aviation. The Bogoslov volcano on Bogoslov Island, which is part of the Aleutian Islands, briefly erupted about 4 p.m. Alaska time. Pilots told the observatory that a cloud of volcanic ash rose to 34,000 feet. At about 6 p.m., reports said that the cloud had mostly dissipated and did not pose air quality problems for local communities. Later, the alert level was downgraded because activity had
On December 19th, a region of the Sahara Desert was hit by a freak snowfall. The town of Ain Safra is 1,078 meters above sea level and is surrounded by the Atlas Mountains. The Sahara Desert is the largest hot desert in the world, covering more than 9 million square kilometers. It covers most of North Africa. Temperatures can reach as high as 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
For most of us, Christmas is a joyous time of year. However, for Christians in some Muslim countries, the celebration is tempered with unease. Many wonder if their Christmas worship services will be safe. Gary Lane has that story from Lahore, Pakistan.
In the wake of the Christmas market attack in Berlin and the recent slaughter of Egyptian Christians as they worshipped in Cairo, Christians around the world are bracing themselves for more possible attacks this Christmas. In Pakistan, Christians are a tiny minority in the Muslim-dominated country. This will be the first Christmas the Amants will spend without the youngest member of their family. 16-year-old Wasib was an athlete who enjoyed playing cricket. He loves studying math and English and planned to eventually earn a PhD in engineering. Last spring, Wasib was killed in a terrorist bomb attack against Pakistani Christians celebrating Easter in a popular city park.
I loved my son. He didn't do anything against anyone. They killed him because they knew he was a Christian, but we forgive them in the love of Christ.
The Ahmad family was not alone. 75 people were killed and hundreds injured when the Islamic extremists detonated a suicide vest packed with explosives. Another 16-year-old Christian, Sharoon Patra, was also among the dead. CBN News talked with his parents.
My son Sharoon was the most obedient of my children. I was always thought he'd be the one to take care of me when I get old. But we know from the gospel, as Jesus forgives them, we must also forgive those who did this.
18-year-old son Irfan survived the attack, but hot shrapnel from the blast tore into his back and stomach, damaging nerves surrounding his intestinal tract.
God spared me so I can serve him. I want to be a missionary.
An explosion went off outside the headquarters of a Christian lobbying group in Sydney, Australia, Wednesday. A man driving a van with gas cylinders set off the explosion, injuring himself and blowing out the building's windows. Police say the attack was not politically motivated, but the Australian Christian lobby says they've received death threats for supporting traditional marriage. The head of the group, Lyle Shelton, is skeptical and said at a news conference, "You don't just drive around the corner here at 10 o'clock at night, park a van, load it with gas cylinders, then detonate it, unless you're trying to send a message to the ACL." Police said they were investigating the explosion and the threats against that group.
Republicans want to pass the First Amendment Defense Act, FADA, which will likely succeed because of a Republican-controlled House and the backing of President-elect Donald Trump. FADA would allow business owners to legally discriminate against LGBTQ people. The act will protect the rights of all entities to refuse service to LGBTQ people based on two sets of beliefs. One, marriage is or should be recognized as the union of one man and one woman, or two, sexual relations are properly reserved to such a marriage. FADA allows individuals and businesses to sue the federal government for interfering in their right to discriminate against LGBTQ people and would mandate the Attorney General defend the businesses.
"49-year-old Marleen is an events organizer at a public library in the Belgian city of Antwerp. She's been living as a woman since 2005, but has no plans to undergo gender reassignment surgery. Until now, that means she can't change her gender on official documents and is still registered as a man.
I decide. I need to decide for myself. I know who I am, not people telling me who I am. So I don't need a doctor telling me that I'm a woman, because I know what I am. And I don't need a doctor telling me that I can change my first name, because my first name is important to me, but not for the doctor.
A new law in Belgium is soon to make it possible for people like Marleen to change their gender legally without approval from doctors. The transgender bill is expected to pass through the Belgian parliament, but some rights groups say they want to get the proposal changed to remove the need for transgender people to contact support organizations.
On Wednesday, the Kremlin said it did not expect the incoming U.S. administration to reject NATO enlargement overnight, and that almost all communication channels between Russia and the U.S. were frozen. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov was also quoted by Russian news as saying he did not know whether President Vladimir Putin would seek re-election in 2018. However, most Kremlin watchers expect Putin to run for the presidency again.
Russia's deputy foreign minister says that his country describes, quote, as hostile new U.S. sanctions on Moscow over the conflict in Ukraine and is prepared to respond accordingly. Sergei Ryabkov says the Kremlin reserves every right to pick the time, place, and form to react to Washington's anti-Russia measure in a way that suits Moscow. Ryabkov also says that Russia will expand its own sanctions list in response to the U.S. move. Earlier on Tuesday, the U.S. Treasury Department said that it added 7 Russian individuals, 8 entities, and 2 vessels to the list of U.S. sanctions. The individuals are blacklisted for allegedly having links to the previously sanctioned Russia Bank, as well as their business dealings with the Russian Federation Ministry of Defense. Political analyst James Latour says the new sanctions imposed by Washington on Moscow are a non-starter.
It simply shows a lack of imagination, that the idea that somehow we can apply sanctions to Moscow and it will inflict so much pain they'll stop engaging in behavior that we think they should not be engaging in. And of course, that doesn't work. They know it doesn't work, but they don't know what else to do. It's a complete lack of imagination. But I think there's a bigger agenda behind these. I think with the impending accession of Donald Trump to the White House, that there are people in the Obama administration and frankly in the Congress who want to poison the well regarding any possible future rapprochement with Moscow that Mr. Trump might have in mind. There is a mindset that dominates the bipartisan foreign policy established here in Washington, one that is based on the notion of American global hegemony, that we have to basically control or have deciding influence over the entire globe, and it really cannot tolerate any powerful country that is not subservient to Washington. And Moscow clearly is that under President Putin. It was not under Yeltsin, but under Putin it is. And one way or the other, they feel they need to somehow break Russia's will, break Russia to the yoke that we have desired to put on them. And it's not going to work.
Well, the U.S. president-elect has also weighed in on another major international issue, the conflict in the Middle East. Egypt has withdrawn a UN resolution that condemned the building of illegal Israeli settlements after Donald Trump called President Sisi. An Israeli official says the government asked Trump to intervene after hearing that the current U.S. administration wanted to allow the motion to pass. That would be a major change for the United States, which usually protects Israel from criticism at the UN. Let's speak to Greg Kallstrom, who is live for us in Tel Aviv. So, Greg, the Security Council has been working on this resolution for weeks now. Why the last-minute delay?
Well, it's because of Donald Trump, as you said. The Israeli government was very worried that this resolution was going to pass. Prime Minister Netanyahu was up at 3 o'clock in the morning yesterday tweeting himself about the resolution. He cleared his schedule yesterday to spend the day working on it. And in the afternoon yesterday, the Israeli ambassador in Washington asked Donald Trump if he would come out and issue a statement about the resolution. He did that. Then apparently Trump went a step further, and according to the Egyptian presidency, he called President Sisi and personally asked him to withdraw the resolution. Now, President Sisi has high hopes that under a Trump administration, he's going to have better relations with Washington. He was the first world leader to call and congratulate Trump after the election in November, and so obviously decided not to start off the new administration on a bad note, and he decided to pull this resolution.
A showdown over Israel at the United Nations is on ice, perhaps permanently. The UN Security Council was due to vote on a measure condemning Israel's controversial settlements in occupied portions of the West Bank and Jerusalem. But the measure was pulled by its sponsor, Egypt, following some diplomatic pressure from Israel. The U.S. has vetoed similar resolutions in the past. The Obama administration did so in 2011. But administration officials were weighing abstaining or even supporting this latest measure. There's no uncertainty over Donald Trump's stance on Israel. At the behest of Israel, the president-elect publicly demanded Obama veto this latest measure.
Now, a leaked document from the Pentagon is adding to their concern on Capitol Hill. The 4 top defense priorities of the president-elect do not include Russia. This is a shift from military officials who see Russia as the country's #1 threat. This is a clear sign the Trump administration is ready for a restart with the Kremlin. For more on that, let's turn to J.D. Gordon. He's a former Pentagon spokesperson. J.D., good to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much. Let me just point out that no country is named as a priority in this defense priority, the top four. Number one, of course, is ISIS, developing a strategy in defeating ISIS. Number two is eliminate budget caps because they want to spend more money on military projects. Cyber strategy is number three. And number four is the wasteful spending and making greater efficiencies come out of the Pentagon. What's your take on the fact that this is definitely a focus shift, or at least it appears to be, from the Pentagon, and now, of course, what the Trump administration wants to do? Your thoughts?
Hey, Ed, great to see you. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, I think it's great that we have common sense coming back to Washington. Russia is not one of the top four threats that America has. It's not one of the top four threats that Europe has. So it's important to focus on things like the Islamic State, things like cybersecurity, threats that are actually killing Americans and killing our allies.
Now, shifting our focus up north beyond the inter-Korean border. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been keeping himself in public view lately. His intention apparently quite clear: to send a message to Seoul and Washington. Our Kwon So-ah delves into what exactly is running through the mind of Kim Jong-un when he has his state TV broadcasting images of him observing military activities.
Train as if you're at war and always be ready to fire. That's the gist of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's orders to his troops at a recent rocket firing contest. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Wednesday that Kim observed an artillery contest involving multiple launch rocket system batteries and called for intensified exercises both day and night so the troops would be capable of hitting targets anytime. MLRS batteries are known to fire projectiles over a distance of some 40 kilometers. According to the KCNA, Kim Jong-un also observed a nighttime combat flight drill to ensure the country's fighter jets are ready for a sudden and precise raid on an object at night. The North Korean leader was reportedly very pleased with the exercise, as the KCNA said that Kim, who gave the commands himself and assessed the troops' combat capabilities, clapped and laughed, commenting that it was as if he were looking at a daytime exercise, not one conducted at night.
Syrian state-run media says the government has regained control of the city of Aleppo. The opposition had controlled half of the city over the past 4 years. President Bashar al-Assad's forces started gaining back control of that half of the city in November. While expected, the fall of Aleppo marks a major milestone for the regime in the nearly 6-year war. Aleppo was once one of the country's largest cities, but fighting between the opposition and the regime, including airstrikes carried out by the regime and its Russian allies, have reduced the city to rubble. The eastern part of the city was the last to be held by the opposition. In recent days, people there could evacuate under a deal that allowed the regime to retake the city. According to the United Nations, about 25,000 people were evacuated from the city between December 15th and 20th.
Images of U.S. military vehicles in Hezbollah possession sends shockwaves through the international community. A U.S.-made M113 vehicle was photographed during a Hezbollah parade on November 13th. While the armed religious extremists are based in Lebanon, the Hezbollah parade took place in the Syrian city of Qusair. Alongside the U.S. military equipment, several Russian-made vehicles rolled down the street as well. A U.S. State Department official told the Washington Post that it remains a mystery as to how the military equipment ended up in Hezbollah's hands. While the U.S. does supply Lebanon with military equipment, the State Department official said, quote, "The Lebanese military has publicly stated that the M113s depicted online were never part of their equipment roster." However, UPI noted that Israel has received the vehicles and supplied the southern Lebanese army with them. From there, they could possibly have fallen into Hezbollah's hands. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Molly Real.
Lines outside ATMs snake around the block, but getting cash in Venezuela is nearly impossible. Many banks have limited customers to tiny withdrawals that don't even begin to meet their needs. In some cases, it's 2,000 bolivars a day, which is around just $1.
Venezuelans are desperate because they were told the 100 Bolivar note was pulled from circulation. Most of them ran to the bank to deposit their no longer legal tender notes. But President Maduro reversed the decision, and now people are nervous because they can't get the money they deposited back.